And tonight, KCRA3 investigates some serious concerns about Homeland Security.
Trains loaded with hazardous materials are sitting unsecure for hours at a time.
On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning, there are more people sitting in an aluminum tube underneath New York City than in 27 or 28 full 747s. There's no ventilation, there's no lighting, there's no escape, there are very few police, etc. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and the CIA has already told us that.
How safe are America's railways? Today, we are here not only to continue this discussion, but to examine the topic of hazmat training in rail security as it relates to rail workers, first responders, and citizens living in rail communities.
The FBI warned that al-Qaeda is targeting U.S. railroads, setting crosshairs on bridges and hazardous materials cars.
You don't buy a ticket because you're a Republican or a Democrat. You want to ride a system that's safe and sound, and you want to make sure that the systems that go forward in a manner that makes that a reality. History has told us that our nation's rail and mass transit systems are a prime target for terrorists. With that valuable information in our pocket, it baffles me why the Transportation Security Administration, the Congress and Bush administration has failed to act.
TSA, the Transportation Safety Administration, spent 90% of its budget on airline security, leaving just 10% to secure the nation's ports, pipeline, trucks, buses, and rail.
There's a pattern out there now that should be recognizable to us, that this is the chosen method of terrorism for al-Qaeda and those affiliated groups. And we, and I'm preaching to the crowd, to the choir this morning, we need to wake America up to that reality and take those reasonable steps necessary to provide the greatest security to our citizens.
For years, the U.S. Department of Energy has shipped large amounts and a variety of radioactive materials by rail. The number of rail shipments, as you've heard earlier, is expected to increase in the coming years. With the increase in rail shipments comes the increased risk for rail incidents involving radioactive material.
A former presidential security advisor called them the greatest vulnerability in our country today, a possible weapon of mass destruction.
And they are running through our city almost every hour. Of course, we're talking about chemical transport trains.
In the airline industry, as was mentioned earlier today, has been allocated about $3 billion since 9/11 for security funding. The railroad industry and all other modes, which is very important, all other modes combined have only been allocated about $110 million. It is really time to balance this out. I don't put it all on the government. I think everyone has a role to play. Corporations have a role to play. It's their assets that are being protected. They need to belly up as well. Unions and workers have a role to play. We are willing and able partners in this area. And we want to do our part to protect those assets, to protect the United States of America, our country that we love.
I've seen the railroad change. I was always fascinated by it, like a lot of people. We had cooperation. We had a company there that was locally owned. We could call them. If there was a problem with the crossing or whatever, we would always get response. And then it changed.
First responders, God love them, we're thrusting all this responsibility on them. They don't have the equipment, the capability, the training, and even when they do, the downside will be tremendous for their personal health and well-being. With regard to labor, labor is figuring out they're the ones that are going to be victimized. They're the ones on the track. They're the ones working the yards. They're the ones without the security to protect them.
Department of Homeland Security, after 9/11, made grants available for a lot of departments, a lot of rail services, a lot of businesses, law enforcement to buy the equipment, but the Department of Homeland Security did not fund the money for training. That's where we like to step in and kind of bridge the gap. And we like to make sure that if there is any disconnect, that we're aware of that, and that we train those people so that one team can talk to the other team so that everyone stays safe at the incident.
By and large, there is a real lack of comprehensive training. People don't really understand the commodities that they're dealing with. They don't know how to research those commodities, how to respond to those commodities, and quite frankly, how to even initiate the emergency response sequence by notifying the proper authorities and getting the more skilled support to the scene.
I get hysterical every time I see that Graniteville accident, because I've met the mom and the dad of a 26-year-old locomotive engineer, and that shouldn't have happened. There is technology today, and there has been technology that is as old as my 3 decades of history that could have prevented that.
Trains collided in South Carolina. A chlorine cloud poisoned hundreds of people and left 9 dead, including 4 firefighters.
The railroads make the important point that 99.98% of their shipments of rail, they arrive safely without a derailment or a major leak. And although statistically it may be a rare occurrence, obviously the effects on public health from the release of a substance during rail transportation is potentially catastrophic.
By engaging in an open discussion of this topic, it is our hope that together we can bring about a higher level of safety and security in our country's railway system.